Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I want to share a story that is close to the heart, a story of quiet beginnings, brave steps, and a voice that rose from silence to inspire the world. It's about Mary, a village girl who couldn't say a single word in English. But one day, she met a volunteer under a tree. And from that moment, everything changed. She learned. She taught. She traveled across the world, and she came back, not just with a certificate, but with a purpose. This story isn't just about Mary. It's about every girl who's ever felt invisible, every child who's ever believed they were too small to matter, and every dream that started with a single uncertain word. So sit back, take a breath, and let this story remind you that even the smallest voice can grow into something powerful. The Girl Who Watched the Wind. In a quiet village surrounded by rice fields and soft winds, there lived a girl named Mary. She was born in a wooden house, the youngest of 5 children. Her mother sold vegetables in the market. Her father worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset. Mary never spoke English. In fact, she didn't know anyone who did. Her world was simple: the smell of steamed rice in the morning, the laughter of her older brothers climbing mango trees, and the hum of the old radio her mother played while chopping vegetables. She had never seen a computer. She didn't know where Australia was. She barely knew how big the world could be. But she had dreams. They were quiet dreams, the kind that hid in the corners of her heart, like wanting to read the signs she saw on visitors' backpacks, or to understand the lyrics in songs she sometimes heard on the radio. She didn't tell anyone, not even herself. Not really. Because what good was a dream if you didn't even know the language it lived in? The day the stranger came. Mary was 13 when a stranger came to her village. He wasn't like the other travelers who passed through and took pictures of the lotus pond. He didn't wear fancy clothes. He carried a backpack that looked old and torn. His name was Daniel, and he was a volunteer teacher from far away. Mary didn't know where he came from. She didn't even understand the words he spoke when he greeted the village elder. But the way he smiled, it was kind, gentle, like the sun through the clouds. That evening, Mary sat outside her house watching the cows return home. She saw Daniel crouch near the temple gate with a few curious children. He took out a small whiteboard and started drawing pictures: an apple, a house, a cat. Then he pointed and said the words slowly: apple, house, cat. The kids laughed and repeated after him. Mary didn't join. She stayed behind the fence, holding a basket of lemongrass for her mother. But something stirred inside her. A tiny spark. The first word. The next day, Mary followed the sound of voices again. She stayed far back, sitting near the tree with her bare feet hidden in the grass. Daniel drew more pictures. This time he held up real objects: a spoon, a cup, a notebook. He said each word clearly. Then he handed it to the children and asked them to say it too. His voice was full of patience, as if he had all the time in the world. Suddenly, his eyes met Mary's. She froze. He smiled. "Do you want to try?" he asked gently, holding out the spoon. Mary didn't answer. She looked down, afraid. But slowly, very slowly, she stepped closer. Daniel placed the spoon in her hand and said, "Spoon." Mary's lips moved. Nothing came out. "Spoon," he repeated. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Spoo." "Try again," Daniel encouraged. She took a deep breath. "Spoon." A spark became a flame. The children clapped, and Mary smiled. The classroom under the tree. Every afternoon after helping her mother at the market, Mary would go to the old tree near the temple where Daniel held his lessons. There were no desks, no blackboard, just a mat, a whiteboard, and a bag of markers. That was their classroom. Daniel taught with pictures, gestures, songs, and stories. He spoke slowly, repeated often, and smiled always. He didn't care that Mary didn't know how to spell apple or happy. He cared that she tried. The other children came and went, but Mary stayed every day. She sat in the front. She brought a small notebook tied with a string. She wrote every word Daniel said, even when she didn't understand it. She would whisper the words as she swept the house. She'd practice them while washing dishes. She'd even teach them to her younger brother at night before bed. Daniel noticed. One day, he gave her a small book. It was old, faded, but it had stories in English, simple ones, about children and animals. Mary held it like it was treasure. "You're doing great," Daniel said. "Keep going. You can be a teacher one day." Mary laughed. "Me? A teacher?" Daniel looked at her, serious now. "Yes. One day, you'll teach others. You just need to believe." Mary didn't say anything, but in her heart, something bloomed. The girl who taught others. Mary kept learning, day by day, word by word. Soon, Daniel noticed something new. Mary wasn't just learning English, she was teaching it. One day, when Daniel was late, a few younger children sat waiting under the tree. Mary didn't want them to go home disappointed, so she stood up, took a stick, and wrote apple in the dirt. Then banana, then sun. She said each word, softly the way Daniel did. The children copied her. They giggled when she made funny faces to explain meanings. By the time Daniel arrived, Mary had taught them 10 new words and a song. He stood at a distance, smiling. When she finished, he clapped. "You're not just a student anymore," he said. "You're a teacher now." Mary blushed. But she felt something. She had never felt before confidence. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the bamboo ceiling. Her heart was beating fast, as if it were whispering a secret. Maybe I can teach. Maybe I can dream bigger. A letter from the city. A few weeks later, Daniel handed her an envelope. "This is for you," he said. Mary took it with shaking hands. She had never received a letter in her life. Inside was a form. It was for a small scholarship program in the city for young learners who showed promise in English. If accepted, she could join a teacher training workshop. She looked at the paper. It was all in English. "I can't read it," she whispered. Daniel kneeled beside her. "But you can. I'll help." And so they spent the next week filling out the form, practicing speaking and preparing for the interview. When the day came, Mary wore her best dress. Her mother gave her a ribbon for her hair. Her father, quiet and unsure, placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Be brave." She traveled 3 hours by bus, alone to the city. Everything was loud, fast, confusing, but when they asked her in English, "Why do you want to learn?" Mary looked them in the eyes and said, "Because I want to teach. I want to help girls like me find their voice." The letter that changed everything. 3 weeks passed. Mary returned to village life, helping her mother, studying her little book, teaching words to the children under the tree. But in her heart, she waited. Then one morning, a motorbike came up the dusty road. The driver handed Mary's father a brown envelope with her name on it. Mary opened it with trembling hands. She read the first line, then burst into tears. "You got it?" her mother asked. Mary nodded. "Yes." They said yes. The city program had accepted her. She was invited to attend a 6-month English training course for future teachers. They would cover her transportation, food, materials, and give her a small living stipend. It wasn't a university. It wasn't a college. But to Mary, it was a bridge, a door, a miracle. The first goodbye. Daniel stood next to her at the village bus stop. "I can't believe I'm leaving," Mary whispered. "You're not leaving," he said. "You're growing." Mary hugged him. "You changed my life." Daniel smiled. "No, Mary, you changed your life. I just handed you a spoon." They both laughed at the memory. Then the bus came. Mary climbed aboard, her old notebook in her bag and a new dream in her heart. She looked out the window as the village grew smaller behind her. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was becoming the woman she once thought she'd never be. A new world of walls and windows. The city was nothing like Mary's village. There were tall buildings, fast cars, and signs she couldn't read. People spoke too quickly. Lights blinked even at night. Mary felt like a seed thrown into a storm. But the school, the training center, was quiet, clean, and welcoming. Her classroom had whiteboards, bookshelves, projectors, and computers she had never touched before. Her fellow trainees came from different places. Some wore glasses. Some spoke English confidently. Some had already finished high school. Mary had never even typed on a keyboard. On the first day, she sat in the back, holding her notebook tightly. The teacher asked a question. "What makes a good English teacher?" A few girls answered. Mary didn't. She felt her cheeks burn. "I don't belong here," she thought. But then she remembered Daniel's words. "You changed your life." So she wrote this sentence on her page. "I belong because I am trying." Learning to rise. The training was tough. Mary had to wake up at 5 a.m. to catch the bus. She washed her clothes at night. She shared a small room with 3 other girls. She missed her family. She missed her tree. Some days she cried in the bathroom, but she never gave up. She stayed. After class to ask questions, she borrowed grammar books from the library. She practiced English with the guards, the cleaning ladies, even strangers on the bus. She volunteered to tutor a younger student who was struggling and suddenly realized she was already becoming a teacher. Her teachers noticed. "She has a light," one of them said. "She reminds me of why we do this." One day, a new guest speaker visited their training class. He was from Australia, and he talked about scholarships. Mary raised her hand. "Where is Australia?" she asked. The room went quiet. The man smiled. "It's very far from here, but not too far for someone like you." The dream that scared her most. Mary couldn't stop thinking about it. Australia. A country she couldn't even find on the map. A place that sounded like a story. Too big, too far, too beautiful for someone like her. But something inside her kept whispering, "Why not you?" The next day, she stayed after class and asked her mentor, Teacher Lena, "Can someone like me apply for that scholarship?" Lena looked at her with soft eyes. "Why not you, Mary?" "But I'm just a village girl. I don't speak well enough. I've never traveled far. You learn fast. You work harder than anyone. That scholarship isn't looking for perfect girls. It's looking for brave ones." Mary didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window of the shared dormitory, looking at the city lights, whispering English sentences to the stars. The application. The scholarship application was long and full of unfamiliar words. Mary didn't understand some of the questions. She didn't know what to write under, life goals, or future contribution to community. But she remembered Daniel's words. So she wrote her story, honestly, humbly, with heart. She wrote about the wooden house, the market mornings, the tree classroom, the first word she had ever spoken, spoon. She told them her dream. "I want to be an English teacher in my village. I want to help children like me believe they can speak, grow, and shine." Then came the hard part, the interview. Mary had never spoken English in front of a panel before. She wore her best shirt, tied her hair back, took deep breaths. They asked her questions. Some she understood, some she didn't. But she didn't give up. When they asked, "What will you do if you don't get selected?" she replied quietly, but clearly, "I will cry one night. But next day, I will try again." The call that changed her life. 2 months passed. Mary had finished her training program and returned to her village to teach the local children under the tree once again. She didn't talk much about the scholarship. Deep inside, she didn't want to hope too much. One afternoon, she was teaching the word hope to a group of wide-eyed kids when her mother ran barefoot down the path holding a phone. "Mary!" she called, breathless. "A call. From the city. They say your name." Mary's heart stopped. She held the phone with shaking hands. "Hello?" a woman's voice answered. "Mary? Congratulations. You've been selected for the Australian Teacher Scholarship. You'll study English education for 2 years in Melbourne. Full tuition, housing, monthly allowance." Mary didn't hear the rest. She dropped to her knees. She cried. She laughed. The children around her clapped, not really understanding, but sensing something magical had just happened. She was going to Australia. The girl who once couldn't say spoon was now flying across the world to study English. The passport and the promise. Mary had never been to an airport, never been on a plane, never seen a passport. She had to go to the capital city to get her documents. Her father sold his old bicycle to help with the travel costs. Her village held a small ceremony to bless her journey. Her mother held her hand tightly the night before she left. "Are you afraid?" she asked. Mary nodded. "Yes." Her mother smiled. "Good. That means your dream is bigger than your fear." Wings above the clouds. Mary had never even seen an airplane up close before. Now, she was standing in line to board one, with a passport, a visa, a heavy backpack, and a heart full of nervous hope. Her hands trembled as she fastened the seatbelt. The plane rumbled like thunder beneath her. As it took off, she grabbed the seat and shut her eyes. But when she opened them, the clouds were beneath her. For the first time in her life, she was above the sky. She whispered, "I am flying." The land of firsts Melbourne was loud, cold, and full of signs Mary couldn't read fast enough. She had to take a taxi alone. She had to use a map app. She had to figure out how to buy groceries in a store with 1,000 kinds of milk. Her dorm room had a heater and a desk lamp. It felt like a hotel. But at night, she cried. Everything was new. Everything was fast. People spoke quickly, and she struggled to understand. Her first day of class, the teacher asked her to introduce herself. She stood up. Her voice trembled. I am Mary. I come from small village. I love English." A few students smiled, politely. One girl even whispered, "That was cute." Mary sat down, heart sinking. One step at a time. But Mary didn't give up. She recorded her lessons on her phone and replayed them at night. She made vocabulary cards and taped them to her mirror. She joined a free English conversation group at the library. She got a part-time job cleaning dishes at a restaurant. Every time someone ordered in English, she would write the words in her notebook during break. One day, her professor said, "Your writing has improved a lot, Mary." And when she got a B+ on her first paper, she took a picture of it and sent it to Daniel with the message, "I didn't give up. I'm learning." From student to sister. By her second semester, something had changed. Mary still made mistakes. She still had an accent. But now she wasn't afraid to speak. One afternoon at the university library, she met a new student from another small country. Her name was Amina, and she looked lost, holding a schedule, tears in her eyes. Mary walked over and smiled. "You new here?" Amina nodded, barely speaking. Mary took her hand and said gently, "I was like you." She helped Amina find her class. She sat with her at lunch. She taught her how to use the washing machine and where to buy cheap noodles. Soon, more students started coming to Mary, not because she was perfect, but because she understood what it felt like to be new. She started a volunteer group for international students. They met every Saturday in the park, practicing English, laughing, sharing stories of home. One day, Amina stood up and said, "I almost gave up, but Mary made me stay. She is not just my friend, she is my sister." The letter to her village. As Mary grew stronger, her heart never left her village. She wrote letters back home, describing her studies, her jobs, the trains, the snow. She saved part of her work money to send school supplies to the children who now gathered under the same tree where she once sat. Daniel replied with a photo. 10 little girls holding pencils, notebooks, and smiling with pride. He wrote, "They believe now. Because of you." The test before the triumph. Mary was in her final year. Her courses had become more advanced: lesson planning, educational theory, classroom psychology. She studied late into the night and worked part-time, on weekends. But one cold winter, her body gave up. She fainted during a class presentation. At the clinic, the doctor said, "You're severely anemic. You're exhausted. You need rest." Mary sat on the hospital bed and cried. "I can't stop now," she whispered. Her friends came to visit. Amina brought soup. Her professor gave her an extension on assignments. But Mary was still scared. What if she failed? What if she had come all this way? Just to break? That night, she looked at herself in the mirror and repeated the words she had once written. "I belong because I am trying." She got back up. One small step at a time. The final exam. The final English teaching assessment was intense. Mary had to teach a full mock class in front of professors, students, and local educators. She wore a plain dress and held her notes tightly. When her name was called, she walked to the front, took a deep breath, and began. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary. I come from a small village. And today I want to show you that learning English is not about being perfect. It's about being brave." Her voice was clear. Her lesson was simple, engaging, joyful. When she finished, the room clapped. A professor stood and said, "Mary, not only did you teach well, you inspired us." The day of the robes graduation day came with golden light. Mary stood in line wearing a black gown and cap, holding her graduation certificate with trembling hands. Her name had been printed on the dean's list, high honors. As she walked across the stage, cameras flashed. But Mary didn't look at the lights. She thought of her mother cooking rice over the fire. She thought of Daniel drawing an apple on a whiteboard under a tree. She thought of that one word, spoon, the first English word she ever spoke. Now she had hundreds, thousands, and she was using them to change lives. 2 roads. After graduation, Mary received 2 letters. The first was an offer from an educational NGO in Melbourne. They wanted her to stay and help train English teachers for rural communities across Asia and Africa. The second was from her village. The mayor had written, "We have opened a small school. Will you come and teach our children English?" Mary sat, alone in the garden, holding both letters. One was a path of global impact. The other was home. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind. And then she smiled. The return. The bus rolled into the village as the sun was setting. Children ran alongside it, shouting her name. Mothers peeked from their doors. Her brothers waved from the mango trees. Mary stepped off the bus, not in a school uniform, not with shy eyes, but with a gentle strength. She wore simple clothes, a worn backpack, and a heart full of purpose. Her mother cried as she hugged her. "You did it." Mary smiled, eyes wet. "We did it." The next day, she walked through the village holding a box of books. She stopped at the old tree and gasped. There was a new building beside it, small, simple, with wooden walls and a tin roof. A hand-painted sign read, "Mary's English Corner, the first class back home." The bell rang, a real bell, not just someone calling out. 20 children sat on bamboo mats. Some had never even held a pencil. Others already knew a few words. Mary stepped in and smiled. "Good morning," she said. Silence. Then one little voice whispered, "Good morning." Mary nodded. "Today, we learn not just English. Today, we learn that you are enough." She picked up a spoon. and just like Daniel once did, she held it up and said spoon. Laughter echoed. A new circle had begun. Seeds of change. Mary's small school quickly became more than a classroom. It became a dream factory. The children came in barefoot, shy and unsure. They left singing songs in English, pointing to trees and saying, "This is a leaf," or "That is a bird." But Mary didn't stop there. She remembered how she had once felt invisible, afraid to speak, unsure of her place. So she started something bold: free evening classes for women, young mothers, teenage girls who'd dropped out, grandmothers who'd never held a pencil. She greeted each of them the same way. "You belong here. We start together." At first, only 3 women came. By the end of the first month, there were 20. Some brought babies on their backs. Some came straight from the fields. But they came, and they learned. One mother, after 3 months, stood up and read a full paragraph aloud. The room clapped. She cried. Mary whispered, "You're not just learning a language. You're remembering your worth." The ripple effect word spread. Other villages wrote to Mary. Could she come and help them set up schools too? Mary trained 2 of her former students, now teenagers, to begin teaching younger children. She gave them small salaries from her savings. She started a tiny library, books donated from friends around the world, even some sent from her university in Australia. She created flashcards, songs, games, lessons printed on banana leaf paper when there was no electricity. Mary's village, once known only for its rice fields, was now known for hope. A journalist visited, wrote a story called "The Girl Who Couldn't Say Spoon." Now teaches the world. The invitation one rainy afternoon, Mary received an email. She rarely checked it, her phone signal was weak, and the school Wi-Fi barely worked. But this one message changed everything. It was from her old university in Melbourne. Subject: "You are our inspiration." They were organizing a global education conference, bringing together teachers from around the world. And they wanted her, Mary, to come as a keynote speaker. Her travel, hotel, and even new clothes would be covered. At first she laughed. Me? Speak in front of hundreds? But her students, those bright-eyed girls and boys, stood up and said, "You told us to believe in ourselves. Now it's your turn." So she packed her bag, wore a scarf her mother had stitched, hugged every child before she left, and flew across the sky once again. The stage Mary stood behind the curtain, her hands sweating. A crowd of over 400 teachers, leaders, and students filled the university hall. The announcer read her bio. From a village with no electricity to teaching hundreds across rural communities, please welcome Miss Mary. The lights were bright. The microphone hummed. The hall went silent. Mary stepped onto the stage. She took a breath and began. 10 years ago, I couldn't say spoon. I had no map, no passport, no voice. Today, I stand here because someone believed in me, and then I believed in myself. Her words were simple, her accent soft, but her voice was strong. She shared how English had changed her, not just her career, but her confidence, her courage, her power to lift others. When she finished, the room gave a standing ovation. Some were crying. A professor whispered to a student, "That is what education is meant to do." Brick by brick, dream by dream, Mary returned home not with souvenirs, but with support. After her speech, several educators, NGOs, and kind strangers approached her. They offered to donate books, send teaching supplies, even sponsor scholarships for her students. One woman said, "I want to build something with you." That was all Mary needed to hear. Back in her village, Mary called a meeting. She stood in front of the children, the mothers, the farmers, and elders and said, "I have a dream. Not just an English corner, not just classes under a roof. I want to build the first real school in our village." At first, people were silent. Then, someone clapped. Then another. Then an old farmer stood and said, "You taught my granddaughter to read. I'll give my land." A young mason offered to work for free. Mothers came to sweep. Children carried bricks. The School of Light. They called it the Light School because it was built with no money, only faith, fire, and love. The school had 4 classrooms, a small library, and a computer room with donated laptops. The walls were painted with colorful drawings by the children themselves. Over the doorway was a sign. This place was built by someone who couldn't say spoon, so you can say everything. Mary taught classes, trained new teachers, created lesson plans, and set up a weekend program for older women who had never learned to write their names. She hired young girls who had once been too shy to speak to now teach others. She gave them titles, young leaders. Every student had a name badge and a journal. Every wall held a quote. The most loved one was, "Small voices grow louder when someone listens." And Mary? She kept listening. The nation listens. One day, a government vehicle arrived in Mary's village. A woman in a formal suit stepped out. She introduced herself as a Ministry of Education official. She had read about the Light School. Her team had seen the photos. But what moved her most? A video. A 5-minute clip of Mary teaching a classroom full of barefoot children to say, "I believe in myself." That clip had gone viral. "We want to understand how you did it," the official said. "No big funding, no university campus. But your school has better results than schools with 10 times the resources." Mary smiled humbly. "I just taught the way I wanted to be taught. With love." The ministry invited her to speak at a national education forum. There, standing next to policymakers, CEOs, and academics, Mary said, "You don't need perfect tools to build a school. You need faith in every child and a teacher who refuses to give up." The room stood to applaud. A bigger map. The government proposed a partnership. Would Mary help create a pilot program to bring small English learning centers to remote villages? Mary agreed, but with a condition. Let the leaders come from within the villages. I'll train them myself. Over the next year, she traveled to 12 provinces, sometimes by boat, sometimes on dirt roads. She carried books in one bag and hope in the other. She trained women who had never left their towns to stand in front of chalkboards and teach apple, hope, future. Every time she entered a new village, children ran to greet her. They didn't call her Miss Mary. They called her something else now. Teacher of Dreams. The tree and the teacher. It had been over 10 years since Mary had last seen Daniel. She didn't know if he was still in the country. She had written letters, but none came back. Sometimes she wondered if he even knew what had happened to her, how far she'd come from that first whispered word. Then one afternoon, as she returned from training a group of new teachers, she saw a man sitting alone beneath the old tree, where it all began. His backpack looked worn, his eyes kind. His hair was now flecked with gray. It was Daniel. Mary froze. He turned, saw her, and stood slowly. His face lit up with recognition. "Mary?" he whispered. She nodded, her eyes already filling with tears. They didn't speak at first. They just hugged. A long, quiet hug beneath the branches that once watched a silent girl learn to speak. "I always wondered," he said. Mary pulled a photo from her bag, the graduation, the classroom, the new school. "I kept going," she said. "You taught me one word, and I built a world with it." Full circle. Daniel stayed for a few weeks in the village watching Mary teach. He attended her women's class and sat in the back of her teacher training sessions. He smiled often, took notes. "You've become a better teacher than I ever was," he said one evening. Mary laughed. "No. I just remembered everything you gave me and gave it to others." Before he left, he gifted her his old whiteboard marker, the one he'd used to draw that very first apple. "I think it belongs to you now," he said. Mary held it like a treasure. Because it was. the circle widens. The years passed, and Mary's work blossomed. Her students became teachers. Her teachers became leaders. Her village became a symbol of possibility. But Mary knew one thing clearly. Education alone wasn't enough. Girls still dropped out of school. Some were forced into early marriage. Others stayed home to care for siblings. Poverty pulled them back, no matter how hard they studied. So Mary created something bold. She launched the Voices of the Future Foundation, a fund to support girls' education through free uniforms, monthly family food support, transportation scholarships, emergency housing university application help, and mentorship, the kind she once received under a tree, with nothing but a whiteboard and a smile. The girl with the notebook. Among her students was a quiet 12-year-old girl named Anya. She never spoke in class. She always sat in the back. But her notebook was full pages and pages of copied sentences, new words, and tiny stars she drew for herself. Mary noticed. She gave Anya extra books, sat with her after class, listened. One day, Anya whispered, "Miss Mary, I want to study abroad one day. Like you." Mary smiled. Then let's begin. They met every weekend, practiced interviews, filled out applications. Anya learned to speak clearly, write essays, and share her story. History repeats with new wings. 2 years later, Mary stood beside Anya at the airport. Anya now wore glasses, a scarf her mother had sewn, and a wide, nervous smile. "You're going to Canada," Mary said, holding her hand. "But remember, you come from here. And your voice will take others there too." Anya hugged her tightly. "You believed in me," Mary whispered. "Someone once did the same for me." As the plane rose into the sky, Mary stood tall. She was no longer just a girl who once couldn't say spoon. She was now a builder of bridges, a planter of forests, a guide for wings still learning to fly. The call from the world. It came in the form of an email again. The subject line simply said, "United Nations Education Summit. Invitation for Mary." She thought it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Her name had reached places she had never imagined through articles, videos, foundations she had inspired. A UN ambassador had seen her story and said, "This is the kind of voice the world needs." They wanted her to speak in New York, alongside global leaders, Nobel winners, and ministers of education. At first, Mary hesitated. "I'm just a village girl," she said to her team. "No," her former student replied. "You're our world teacher now." The world stage. The UN building was full of polished shoes and silk suits. Mary wore a traditional outfit from her village, hand-stitched by the women she had taught. When she walked up to the podium, she could feel her knees shake. But then, she looked out and remembered the mango trees, the children's faces. The first time she said spoon, she took a deep breath and said, "I was born in a place without electricity. I grew up in a house where no one spoke English. Today, I come from a village that now speaks to the world, because someone gave me a word, and I gave that word a home." She shared stories of Anya, of her foundation, of the women who could now sign their names. Her voice didn't need perfection. It had truth. When she finished, the audience stood. One official whispered, "That speech was more powerful than all the policy we wrote this year." A quieter kind of light. After the United Nations, people expected Mary to travel the world. Offers poured in. Universities wanted her to teach. Governments wanted her advice. Publishers begged for her story. But Mary did something surprising. She went home. She planted sunflowers behind her school. She spent her mornings walking barefoot through the fields. She taught again, just like always, but now only twice a week by choice. The rest of the time, she mentored others. She met with young teachers under the same tree where it all began, sipping tea and talking about life, language, and love. The book of her heart. One rainy season, Mary started writing. Not for fame, not for speeches, But for the girl, she used to be the silent one with bare feet and big dreams she couldn't name. She titled her book, The First Word, A Journey from Spoon to the Stars. In its pages were stories real, raw, beautiful. Chapters filled with first mistakes, small wins, moments of doubt, and the quiet power of not giving up. She didn't try to sound wise. She just told the truth. And when the book was published, it was translated into 18 languages. But the only copy that made her cry? The one in her mother's hands, read aloud under candlelight. The life she chose. Mary never married. People asked. She smiled and said, "My life is full of family. My students are my legacy." She built a small cottage next to her school, where she lived simply with a garden, a hammock, and a basket full of notebooks. Sometimes she traveled for conferences. Sometimes she just watched the sunset. And always she taught. One girl at a time. One lesson at a time. One dream at a time. The legacy tree years passed. The school Mary built now had 5 branches across the country. Her foundation had funded over 3,000 scholarships. Her book had reached schools from Cambodia to Kenya, from Brazil to Bhutan. But Mary? She remained in her village. One morning, her students surprised her. They asked her to come outside. She followed them barefoot to the edge of the schoolyard. There, they had planted a tall tree. On it hung small wooden signs painted in bright colors. Each one bore a word: dream, hope, voice, teacher, spoon. They named it the Legacy Tree. The children stood around her and said, "Miss Mary, even when you are not here one day, this tree will teach like you." Mary's eyes filled with tears. She placed her hand on the bark and whispered, "Keep growing." The final words. Mary lived a quiet, joyful life. She was never rich, but she was deeply fulfilled. She saw girls she once taught become doctors, boys who used to fear reading now teaching in other countries, mothers teaching daughters, fathers reading with sons. When people asked her, "What was your greatest success?" she never mentioned speeches or awards. She would simply say, "I gave others what I once didn't have, a voice, a path, a reason to believe they mattered." And when she passed, at a gentle old age, they did not bury her understone. They placed her under the tree, the same one where she first spoke, the same one where thousands learned their first word, the same one that still whispers today, every time the wind passes through the leaves. Even a spoon can begin a revolution. If you've made it to the final page of this story, then you've walked every step with Mary. You've sat under her tree. You've held her fears. You've seen her rise, not because she was lucky or perfect, but because she kept going. Her journey reminds us of a powerful truth. You don't have to be born special. You just have to begin. Let this story stay with you. Let it whisper to you on the days you feel small. Let it remind you, one kind teacher can change a child. One brave girl can light a village, and one first word can lead to a life full of meaning. So speak your first word. Take your first step. Because somewhere, someone is waiting for the teacher, dreamer, or leader inside you. This is not the end. It's your beginning.